correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPGs, a podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. What's up, folks? I'm here with my friend Steve, and we have a very special guest on for the week.
That we do. You know what we have this week, Steve?
What do we have?
We have someone from the future.
Oh, man, I hate having people from the future.
Well, sort of. He's not from the future where he is, but he's from the future where we are.
Oh, so we have another Aussie.
Yes.
Well, I'm pretty sure they have a show on the network. Why don't they go ahead and introduce yourself and introduce your show on the network?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. So my name is Tom, and I'm from Shared Sagas, which is a podcast on the very fine D20 radio network of shows, much like yourself. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm a big fan of your show, and I feel like I'm in really, really distinguished company, particularly with some of the guests that you had over the Halloween period. Jeez.
Well, we felt rather distinguished at that point, I think, but that was, I don't know, Halloween delusions or something, maybe?
Yeah. Hey, spoilers from the future, by the way. Tomorrow's going to be great.
So, do you want to tell folks a little bit about what Shared Sagas is, Tom? Because, we're a talk and chatter podcast.
We are an Australian actual play podcast, one of the many, but we do a whole bunch of different systems. We run Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, a whole bunch of things. We, have a very sort of casual, not overly produced style, which is either your cup of tea or it's not. And, we've been around for a little while. We have some campaigns and also a bunch of one-shots you can listen to. And that's pretty much our whole deal. We have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've been listening to your Star Wars game. I finally got caught up on it like in the last week or so.
Oh, right.
So let me ask you something, because, you and I have talked a little bit before we, got around to recording and all that fun stuff. But I know specifically with your Star Wars game and looking at your feed, at least some of the D&D you've run and so on and so forth, you actually, for the podcast, run a lot of pre-written modules or campaign books.
Yes.
And we figured, one, because we just wanted to talk to you, we'd have you on the show, but also we wanted some sort of topic. So we thought maybe, you could lend us some, give us some insights, some tricks, tips, whatever you've picked up in running pre-written stuff, because while it seems easy on the surface, I'm pretty sure pretty much everyone who's ever played in more than one or two of those has gone, yeah, that didn't, they don't always go as well as you'd expect them to for, what you would think would be easy.
Yes, no, very true. So, we, on the podcast, we've run exclusively published adventures. We haven't run a single one-shot or campaign that wasn't a published adventure or a module, as I call them, because I'm old school. It wasn't originally the intention to be our sort of niche, but basically we just had so much success with our first campaign, which was running the D&D adventure Waterdeep Dragon Heist. And a lot of the engagement that we got was actually just from other GMs who are also running that adventure or intended to. And just, were very, very positive and engaging in, either on Facebook or our Discord, just saying how much they really appreciated our run through and for the purposes of, stealing ideas, getting inspiration, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's definitely something that I do a lot of, either from running convention games, or the other reason I tend to run a lot of published adventures, even outside of the podcast and always have, is just because I like to try new systems. And I think that running a one shot of, a quick start of this or an introductory adventure of this is a really good way to, sort of kick the tires and test out a new system, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I've done that, a few times, although my background, I'm sure there was a lot of published material used, but a lot of the campaigns that I played in, it was like, well, also back then, because I started gaming in the mid and late 90s, there were a few campaigns out there for things that weren't D&D, but not that many.
I think there was, going back, because yeah, I've been gaming for a similar amount of time, I think, so for me since the, mid to late 80s. So I think, there were some really great classic adventures there as well that weren't D&D, like Call of Cthulhu. A lot of stuff that Chaosium did, actually, like Call of Cthulhu and, I guess like big ones like the Great Pendragon campaign, other things like that. But no, it was overwhelmingly D&D as far as notable adventures that everybody knew. But yeah, it can be just as much work. It's not easy to run a module. The idea that running a published adventure and that's it, all the work's done for you. It's just pick up and serve like a microwave dinner or something. But it can actually be daunting for certain people. Some people are more comfortable running adventures and scenarios that they've come up with themselves, which I completely understand. There are sort of pros and cons to running published modules. The other issue is that, let's face it, like a lot of creative endeavors, there's lots of really bad ones out there. There's very, very, very good published adventures and there's very, very bad ones. There's ones that are very, very good, but may have a couple of things that need to get fixed or updated. And so, for example, with the first season of our podcast, we had Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which is a really great module, but it's also one of those adventures that had a few little flaws and faults and sort of plot discrepancies, I guess. Like, I suppose you could call them plot holes or things that were likely to potentially stall. I know that a lot of investigation scenarios historically also have got, particularly older ones before the invention of Gumshoe, had a lot of places where failure to find a clue could just end it and stop the module dead in its tracks. And that's why largely why Gumshoe, the system, exists, is just basically to solve that problem. So they can potentially be a lot of work, but they can also be very rewarding to do.
So I've played in pre-written campaigns or modules where literally the GM didn't read more than a few pages past where we were in the game. And
Yes.
I don't want to tell people that they're playing RPGs wrong. But in my opinion and experience, that is not the way to run a pre-written game.
No, I completely agree. And it's so funny you mention that because that is something that has a lot of pushback online. When basically, whenever the discussion of running modules and, tips and tricks for doing it comes up, there's always an intense argument, seemingly anyway, about whether or not you should read the entire module first. And if so, how to go about doing that. And I don't know. I'm not going to tell people their business, but in my opinion, not reading the module through to the end before running it is just really odd. I don't know how one would do that because there are so many things that modules aren't always really good at foreshadowing. And so sometimes, there could be something that happens at the end of the module that really would have been obvious and that you could have laid foundation for. Like, I mean, basically, when it comes to running modules, I've got 4, as far as tips and tricks go, I guess, Tom's 4 tips and tricks for running modules. Number 2 will surprise you and shock you, etc. Basically, number 2 is actually be familiar and read the module. I mean, like, do you need to read every single word cover to cover? Maybe not, but I'd really advise it because if you think of the time, right? Let's say it's a single night's adventure. It's a one shot, right? It's a convention scenario. It's a quick start for a new game that you want to try. Those are going to be realistically about, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 pages at the most with lots of pictures and such like that. It's not going to be an incredible tax time to read through the whole thing. It might take you 20 minutes. And when you consider you might be running this adventure for 5 hours. I think that spending that 20, 30 minutes reading through it completely, maybe even a couple of times to get really familiar with it, will actually save you more than that when you go to run it, because you'll be less, referencing, flipping back and forth, pausing the game, which can be death for a game, just the GM going, wait a minute, 2 minutes later while they read over a paragraph before getting back to you. I just think being familiar with it is a good idea. And as I say, often in published adventures, foreshadowing can be pretty poor. Like some of them these days have got a really good, nice, extensive summary at the very beginning. It'll be like, hey, this is the adventure. This is, scene 1, scene 2, scene 3 for a one shot, or for a bigger, adventure path or campaign adventure. It'll be like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, a nice clear summary. You can look it over and get an idea of where it's going. But other ones don't do that. And you might get to the final scene and the entire villain behind the entire scenario is suddenly revealed. And, it can be quite dramatically shocking if you were just literally running it as you were going on. So I think you should read it. That's my hot take.
Now you're not going to hear any argument from me. That's for certain.
No, I definitely agree about reading ahead. I think one of the things that sometimes, and I've seen this in discussions online, sometimes people get a little bit like upset about is like, well, I don't want to spoil it for myself. Well, the fact of the matter is that, and I don't mean to, I'm not discouraging anyone, play the game how you like to play it. But in my opinion, when I'm running a campaign that I'm even making myself, I know what the end's going to be. I may not know all the middle details, but I know the major points that I want my players to hit, and I know what the ending is going to be. So spoiling the story as the storyteller is like being an author and going, "But I don't want to spoil the end of this book for you." Well, you're writing it. Like you're coming up with the end of the book.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It seems, but you would be surprised how many people really want to drill in and emphasize the fact that you don't have to read the whole thing cover to cover. Just read a little bit ahead. And I'm like, well, no, because, listen, whether you have to or not's debatable, but I just think it's better to, because as I say, foreshadowing can be really good. I mean, this is whether you're running something that you've written yourself or whether you're running something published. I think that, particularly getting the players to hate the villain way before they meet them, or, dropping subtle little clues on what the answer to the mystery is super fun. Like, is it needed? Maybe not, but like it's really valuable to have that, right?
Well, and to talk about D&D and specifically 5th edition, one of my favorite modules is Curse of Strahd.
Yeah.
I have a buddy that loves it, and his love for Curse of Strahd comes through when we played that module. And and so it was like there was this just fun, and the characters were flushed out and everything was done because he knew the book inside, outside, and backwards. And not saying that you have to, but it does help. It definitely helps the players because it gives you an idea of where the story is going and what you want to do with the story. And it also gives the players a sense because you have a better grasp of what the text says.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things here rolling around in my head around this, right? One, as anyone who's ever GM'd very much knows, very few plot lines survive first contact with the players unscathed.
Yes.
So if you only know the next little tiny bit of it, when the players make a left turn at Albuquerque, what the heck's left of Albuquerque?
Yeah.
If you've read ahead, you can go, well, we'll put, Boston left of Albuquerque. Yeah, or whatever.
I'm going to assume that's wrong. I don't know American geography that well, but I'm going to assume that that's a wrong thing.
Well, yeah, Albuquerque is in New Mexico, which is in the southwest, and Boston is in the northeast in Massachusetts. But, the principle just being that if you know more of the story, some people call it the quantum ogre theory, in that there's an ogre at the end of the series of tunnels, no matter which way you get through there.
Right.
But you know what I mean? Like, the more you know about the story, the more adapted you are to be able to take what your players do and still make it interesting for them. And then, like you mentioned too, the foreshadowing of it, right? Because that's one thing like I love in movies is when you finally get all the way through the movie and then the climax and the reveal at the end, and you go, oh wait, this was foreshadowing that, and this was foreshadowing that. And these other four things. Well, as a GM, you can do that with your players, but not if you don't know what's coming.
Exactly. Exactly. It's just like any mystery, and this is not just in games, but in, movies, film, television. It is so much more satisfying for the audience if when the final reveal happens, when the mystery is solved or whatnot, that you can then look back and think, oh yeah, you can sort of have that usual suspects moment of all the little montage of the clues rolling over in your mind and think, yep, that was logical and consistent, as opposed to just, having something made up at the end. It's so funny. Steve 1, Steve 2, I don't know, other Steve who mentioned Ravenloft,
Yeah.
that you talked about Ravenloft, because Ravenloft is a really good example of why it's really important to pre-read something, because Ravenloft is very atypical as far as bigger published adventures go, in that it is very much a sandbox. Like, you are dumped into this area that is very self-contained, but you can go anywhere. It is one of the most non-linear published adventures that exist, which I think is a large part of why it's so popular. I mean, in Ravenloft, as soon as you're there, you can just go straight to the castle and try and take out Strahd. Done. You can. The GM has to be familiar with the entire sandbox that they're playing in, because the players can literally go anywhere, and then you can have all the fun of, a very, very non-linear adventure. Because a lot of the pushback against published modules is that, they're all railroads or whatever, and that's absolutely not the case. There's quite a few very famous, very great published adventures like Ravenloft or Masks of Nyarlathotep that are really, really open-ended, and you've got lots of choice and flexibility. It's like you say, Steve, you've got a solid end point, like a nice end game, but other than that, you can sort of go here, there, and everywhere. And I just trying to read up on a sandbox style adventure when the players go north. Oh, let me go read up on what's north, and that would just be, I don't know, it would take too much time and be very disruptive, I feel.
Yeah, well, I think that's give me 3 minutes, and suddenly around the table, half a dozen phones come out, and everyone's checking Facebook and whatever
Yeah.
else, and then you have to get that all back.
Exactly. Exactly right. And that's, don't get me wrong, like, having to pause and having to reference things is fine. We're all human. I definitely still have to do that, even if I'm really familiar with a module. A lot of the time, there can be a lot of information, and players, as you say, can just do really weird things that you absolutely do not expect. No adventure survives contact with the players and all that. But no, I think pre-reading's good. I actually have a fun tip for when you go to pre-read your module, which I think you should, which is that when you're reading through it for the first time, I like to, and this is just something that works really well for me, and your mileage may vary. I reckon you should read it through, and as you do so, imagine, it sounds like a silly tip, but imagine running it for your group. Like, really try to play it out in your head. Think like, okay, I know the group of players that I'm running this for. I'm going to read through this module and just kind of imagine in my brain how they are going to respond to this, that, and the other. And that way, if you bump up against something that you feel, like the module suggests, and here your players will likely do X, and you think to yourself, oh, there is no way my players are going to do X. That is ridiculous. That's nonsense. Then you know what you might need to pay attention to and, potentially change. It's just nice to sort of, I don't know, visualize your group going through the whole thing.
Right. Well, yeah, knowing your players helps regardless of whether you're running published or just homebrew adventures. But yeah, it going, okay, yeah. Or the other thing is you read that and you go, oh, Sam's really gonna like this part of this. Or,
Yeah.
whoever. And so, you can work that to your advantage by, okay, I need to set the hook a little deeper in this person for.
Yeah, exactly right. Because that, so basically of my 4 tips, we've already gone through number 2, which is just be familiar and read the module. And I guess just to go in a really weird order, my third tip is change, add, remove. Basically, any module that you purchase or that you get is yours. They are a guideline. They are up to you to change them, add, remove, just hack to pieces, put back together, remix. You know what I mean? You do not have to run a module straight. You can absolutely customize it, and you should customize it because you should try to at least a little bit cater it to your group, as you say. Like there's lots of creativity to be had as well. There's a lot of people that say that running a published module doesn't allow you to be creative as much, but I completely disagree. There's different kinds of creativity. It's like saying a director doesn't have any creativity if they're given a script that they didn't write. And that's nonsense. It's taking something, taking an idea and interpreting it. And as I say, like tie it into your players. When it comes to this particular medium, that's the most important thing is your players, right? Work out what bits they will like and maybe, I don't know, flesh those out. Work out what bits they will find boring and just, cut them out if you can. Tie in your players' backstories, particularly in a longer campaign like a adventure path or a D&D published module or Masks of Nyarlathotep. Anything you can do to really cater it to your players' backstories and such, even entirely changing factions or NPCs that are sort of more in sync with what your players have given you. Be ruthless. Just take what you need, change what you want. It's basically your adventure once you get it to the table.
On that note, if I could ask you a question, your Star Wars game that you're currently broadcasting, I don't know where you're at as regards to what you've played and what's been aired and so on and so forth, but I know you're running Beyond the Rim,
Yes.
and you have a Jedi character as one of your PCs that has a relationship with an NPC that they find on a planet, to not get too spoilery.
Yes. Spoiler. Yeah.
Now, I haven't read the module, so I don't know this, but was that something that you guys set up internally? Are there pre-gens or background tips that are suggested with that particular module or whatever you want to call it?
So basically that's all us. So that NPC is my creation, and obviously Sam, who's playing the Jedi. It's an Edge of the Empire adventure, so it doesn't really cater. You can absolutely run that adventure with Jedi in the party, as we have, but there was not really any advice or things in there to involve any sort of Force or Jedi stuff at all. But I know that is very important to a couple of members of my group. Like Star Wars without Jedi and the Force playing a heavy role doesn't, appeal as much. So yeah, it was very easy to add. So basically, any of the subplot in that particular adventure as it's aired is entirely my creation, and obviously Sam's in the character in the actual Jedi that she's playing. So that's a really good example of, player comes to you with a character that doesn't have much to do in the module as written, so add it. The most important thing is that your players have fun and feel like the effort that they put into their characters is rewarded. Particularly if they're the kind of player to come to you with a really creative and interesting backstory. What a waste if you don't use that. And if it means changing an NPC to fit in with their background, or as I say, completely changing what faction is doing this or that, then yeah, that's more important. Your players are most important.
Well, I was going to say, just based on my listening to that, you've gotten several hours of table play out of that bit that you added in.
Yeah.
And everyone seems rather into it. So
no, exactly right. It's customize, just tie it in, make it all about the players as much as possible. And also for yourself as well, obviously. If you're the sort of GM that doesn't like these particular kinds of encounters, like you find puzzles infuriating and you're pretty sure your players do too, then you know what? That puzzle room of the dungeon, that's gone. Or maybe just questionable content. Like maybe there's some content, particularly in a horror scenario in a Call of Cthulhu adventure that I've run. I can think of several instances where I've changed some sort of horrific thing that just wouldn't really mesh well with the sensibilities of a player in my group, for example. And there's any number of different kinds of content that could have that effect, right? So yeah, just be liberal with changing things, basically.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I guess that's where, like, in my case, a lot of the times where I look at a module and I go, oh wait, I could take it here, and then we're going that way.
Yeah.
And there's nothing saying you can't do that, right? Like,
Exactly.
I've actually got a Star Wars campaign idea in my head that loosely starts very similar to Beyond the Rim. And what I might actually do, depending on who I was running it for, is start it off like Beyond the Rim. So they're going, "Oh, I've played this before. I know." And then all of a sudden they're like, "Wait, huh? What? That's not how that goes." Intentionally curveball them.
I have a funny story with that. So, years and years ago, I was running a Pathfinder adventure path, and it was the Crimson Throne adventure path, which is set in this particular, if you're not familiar with Pathfinder, there's a particular continent called Varesia, and basically the Crimson Throne mostly takes place in this one city. And then players being players, they, about 4 or 5 sessions in, just left the city. They just decided to pick up and leave and completely leave the city. And I just ran with it because what they did was they went west to a different place in that continent. And because Paizo has so many different adventure paths, and at least the first few were all set in that same continent, I literally just stopped running that one adventure path, picked up another one, and just when they got to that other place, I just that Curse of the Crimson Throne adventure path suddenly became a Rise of the Rune Lords adventure path, and everyone had fun, and it was great. But it was just a really weird example of players just like absolutely throwing me for a loop, and the logic they presented to me as to why they would leave the city and not really have a lot of reason to stay, which by the way was my fault. I didn't tie in, and it was not them being disruptive. It was just, no, actually that makes sense. Your players probably wouldn't hang around here, to be honest with you. Great. Let's shift this wagon over, shall we?
See, I understand where you're coming from when you're like, well, it was sort of my fault that I didn't give the players any reason to stick around the city. And I've been in games and also simultaneously, I think we've all done it ourselves, running games where you just miss the players just are like, well, why am I here? Why? I don't want to be here. There's nothing here for me. I'm just going to go somewhere else. And, and that's usually the point at which like inexperienced DMs get like, where are you going to go?
Now what, buddy?
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm over here going, all right, what direction are we headed in?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. And, okay, so with some games, I have learnt from this mistake, shall we say. Well, no, not mistake. I've learnt from this challenge that I was forced to go through. And now I think there's certain games, like I've run a lot of World of Darkness. And oftentimes in World of Darkness, it's all set in a city. So you'll have an entire campaign that's all set in whatever city you choose. And in those games, I will very overtly say, okay, folks, this game is set in Chicago. The game is set in Chicago. The campaign is set in Chicago. That's where we're going to be having all of our adventure. You don't have to stay there the entire time. You can pop out for a day trip if you like. But just understand that if your characters get to a point where they would, in your mind, have no reason to stay in Chicago, that's fine. They are going to leave the city, but in doing so, they are going to leave the campaign. And so that way you'll bring in another character. And I've had that happen. I've had a character say, look, I like this character I'm playing, but with all the sequence of events that have occurred here, there is no way that I can justify my character staying in the city. Is it cool if I get my character to leave and I just make a new character who will come in and, have more of a reason to stay? And I've said, yeah, that's great. That's totally fine. So I think it's okay to lay that as a, how do I describe it? As a foundational premise for the campaign that, it will take place in this city. I think a lot of World of Darkness games and superhero games as well can oftentimes be very tied to a city. And I think that's okay. You just have to be very upfront with your players, I think, before doing that, because you don't want them to start off and have a few sessions and then go, okay, let's leave. And then you say, no, you are staying in the city. You can't leave.
Yeah, no, I think you're perfectly within your rights to establish ground rules like that. Like you said, you do want to be upfront about it. That's the whole thing, right? Gaming is a collaborative, micro community, right?
Yeah.
You need to have people on the same page. That's why session zeros are important.
Yep, they sure are. And that's 100% something that you have in a session zero, for sure.
Yeah, as the GM, you just go, all right, guys, look, here's the deal. We're going to be in a city most of this game. That's the setting I want to play with. If you guys don't want to play with that, we can talk and figure out something else. Or, just throw them the pitch. Like, in my mind, anytime I start even pre-written modules, anytime I start a game, I always do a 1-2 sentence pitch for the game that I want to run.
Yeah.
And you throw them the pitch. If they're not interested, then okay, well, I have other ideas. We could try this or we could try that, or, you know,
Nice to know that early, right?
yeah, it's good to know, oh, well, you guys aren't interested in this, and let's move on to something else then.
Yeah. Actually, sorry, that makes me think that's another really, really good tactic of making sure that you are effectively able to run the module through to its conclusion without it being forced or a railroad, right? Then the way you do that is you work out, as you say, Steve, you have a clear endpoint, and the players can get to that endpoint however they choose, and create lots of flexibility there. But whether it's a campaign you've written for yourself or in running a published module in particular, I think you do have a pretty solid endpoint most of the time. Even with modules that are very open-ended, published adventures that are open-ended, they still normally need to end in one of, one or two or three ways, right? And so the way to get that happening and to make sure that players end up where you need them to be without forcing them or railroading them in the negative sense, I think, is to bake that into the session zero, right? So, for example, just with season 3 of our podcast right now, which hasn't aired yet, but will air after the Star Wars one is finished up, so pretty soon, is Descent into Avernus, Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. And so I just said right from the get-go, I know that this adventure will fall apart if the players do not have a vested interest in avenging this city that was destroyed. And so I just said straight up, look, create whatever characters you want, but here is the rules and guidelines that I'm putting down. Your characters have to be strongly tied to this city. You have to be from there. You have to have family there. You have to, have a really strong connection to this city. So when the campaign opens with this city being destroyed, realize that your end game is to find out who is responsible and make them pay, or prevent it happening to some other city, right? So just right from the get-go, that means that because of the fact that the solution to that problem is fixed, just like the mystery, right? Whoever committed the murder is fixed. That's not railroading. That's just this is actually what happened. This is the person that killed that person. You can make sure that they at least end up where you need them to get eventually, just by, I guess, setting yourself up for success from the get-go.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that just makes it easier for you as the GM. I mean, to
Yeah.
me, that's how it sounds.
Well, exactly right. You just have to make sure that you're all set up and that, basically that they are the kinds of characters who are going to go on the adventure that you have intended, which is kind of important.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, not that you couldn't do it, but some adventures wouldn't work good with, say, an all bard party or whatever. I mean, I'm just making stuff up, right? But
Sure.
Like Beyond the Rim, as written, wouldn't work very good for an all Jedi party.
Yeah, very
Just
true.
wouldn't.
I mean, it's just you have to have. I mean, investigation scenarios are like that. You have to make sure that your players are coming to the table with people that are likely to investigate supernatural things and not just run away and call the cops. So that way, if you present a mystery to them, if you present a Call of Cthulhu adventure to these particular people, that by default they are going to go down into that dark cellar. They're going to investigate everything and get to the end of the damn adventure, basically, without giving up, because their characters wouldn't investigate this horrific thing happening.
That's why I like Delta Green.
Yeah.
Because Delta Green, the whole pitch is that you're government agents. This is your job. You've been hired to do this. There's no like, well, I don't know that I would go down to the creepy basement. Nope. Well, no.
Your Christmas bonus depends on it, Ted.
Yeah. I'll get disappeared if I don't go down to the creepy basement. So whatever's down there is a lot better than my boss.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And a lot of games bake that into the game, just exactly like Delta Green does, right? So Delta Green, Star Trek, any sort of organizational or military style game, that's all taken care of for you. Your supervisor, your boss says to do a thing. That's not you, the GM, railroading you. That's that's their career doing it. That's their chosen career of forcing them down this particular objective.
Oh man, Picard sent me to the planet again.
What color is your shirt again?
It's
No.
my blue one's in the wash.
Now, listen, I know that you don't like the idea of dying miserably on that planet, but in my defense, I think that you should just shut up and put on your red suit.
Look, there's another Riker down there. We need to go figure it out. Oh man, I love. I'll just go off on a tangent. I love Star Trek, like as a campaign setting. I think that game
Oh,
would
it's
be
great.
so fun to play.
It's great. Have you played the new one?
No, I have not. I haven't got a chance to. I haven't got a chance to play a lot of things recently.
Yeah, very true. Actually, speaking of, there are published adventures. There are many really good published adventures for the new Star Trek. It's very, very good. The Modifius do a great job in their published adventure work. There's a lot of crappy published adventures out there. The ones from Modifius, the Star Trek ones in particular, are really, really good.
Good to hear.
That is good to hear. Modifius has been putting out some pretty cool stuff recently.
They are great. I like their 2D20 system.
I haven't had any chance to play with it or really read it yet. It's on my list of things to check out. I'm just trying to figure out which flavor to check out.
Right. The thing is, Modifius seems hell-bent on collecting licensed properties like Pokemon. They've got so many of them. You know, they've got, what is it? Star Trek, they've got Conan, they have Dune now. They just have another. They have Fallout.
And then if they don't have it, Free League is doing it, and Free League distributes through them.
Yeah,
So
that's exactly right. Between the two of them, they just have everything covered.
Unless it's what's the one that just got all the Hasbro licenses?
oh, Renegade.
Renegade. Yeah. If they don't have it, Renegade might have it.
Exactly. Speaking of research into good quality modules, real quick, my number one tip for running published modules is basically before you go to run it, do online research, because we live in this wonderful, wonderful age where basically if you want to run, for example, the quick start adventure or whatever of the latest adventure that's a role-playing game system that's just come out. Like, let's say you mentioned you have an interest in trying the Modifius Star Trek, and you pick up the quick start, and you think, okay, well, you know, what's some advice on this? You can literally find multiple like YouTube actual plays of the actual, in a lot of cases, the designers of the game running it through. Like, what an amazing resource that we didn't have when I was playing role-playing games in high school. Just to jump on YouTube and, you know, this adventure I'm thinking of running, maybe I'll just watch, I don't know, the actual writer or publisher of this adventure run it through. It's just the internet is an amazing resource, and there are so many reviews and you know, even actual plays that you can just get inspiration from. It's really quite uncanny.
Well, and to sort of springboard off that, some of the smaller stuff, smaller modules, smaller games, it's always amazing to me when I go over to drive through and somebody posts like a logistical question of like, I don't understand how this mechanic works. And then you see the author just like, well, here, this is how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's amazing.
The drive-through comments, like the drive-through reviews / comments section is one of my favorite places to just be like, how is this game? And people are just like honest in there because they know that most of the time you'll reach somebody at the company and they'll just be like, well, but it's like this.
Yeah, listen, basically that is my number one tip. If you listen to nothing else that I babble on about today, any module you're thinking of running, just jump online, look up tips, tricks, look at YouTube videos of other people playing it, resources, like particularly with really bigger ones, like the big Call of Cthulhu adventures. I know that the online Call of Cthulhu community, and obviously the D&D one, but you know, they're huge. And so, you know, if you want to run Masks of Nyarlathotep or really anything, any famous module, you'll have play reports, you'll have, you know, handy resources that people have got up there for free. A recommendation for anyone looking to run a Call of Cthulhu adventure in particular, to listen to Seth Skorkowski's YouTube video on that adventure, because literally I'm pretty sure he's done pretty much every Call of Cthulhu scenario.
Look, I would say just blanket good advice for anyone looking anything RPG is go watch some Seth Skorkowski videos.
Isn't he great? Yeah.
He's great to talk to too. He's really genuine dude.
I imagine he would be. But no, honestly, step one, whenever I go to run a Call of Cthulhu adventure, is go and watch his instructional video on running that adventure. Because it's great, because they're always bite-sized. They're always 20 minutes. And it's literally just him going through the whole thing and saying, hey, this is what I changed. This makes this adventure objectively better in this bit. It's like he's done all the work for you. It's just so good. I really want to call that one out in particular. With D&D, you've obviously got the DM's Guild for all these extra, support, help, cheat sheets, whatever. Even if you're thinking of running a module and you look up tips and tricks for running the module and the resounding answer is don't, it's terrible. At least you know. And, maybe hopefully before you spend money on it. Or at least you can look at issues that people had with it and then you can see if it's worth your while fixing it. But yeah, the internet's great. Use it.
I would say, yeah, I've done that. I know for the one I remember the most using it for was the quick start for Delta Green. I don't know if you've ever run that, Tom.
Yes. Sad story. I actually recorded that for the podcast, but we lost the audio. It was poor audio. It was one of the only one shots we recorded that couldn't end up being used just because it didn't turn out great audio wise.
Well, I've run that twice, and both times I discovered if you're into Call of Cthulhu and stuff, and I think we mentioned this when John and Seth were on the podcast, there's a YouTube channel called Into the Darkness, which is just massive amounts of primarily Call of Cthulhu actual plays, but there's some writing stuff, there's some Delta Green, there's some other like offshoot Cthulhu systems. But they did a playthrough of that adventure called Need to Know. And when I ran it, which Steve played the first time I ran it, I ripped a whole bunch of ideas straight out of their version of it. And then, because I watched / listened to their version before I actually read it, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, they added a bunch of stuff. Oh, okay. So I can just do this or that or this other thing. And it's like, even though you're intellectually aware that you can change and add things and whatever, seeing someone else do it is like getting that permission slip signed.
Yes, that's exactly the feedback that we had with our playthrough of Dragon Heist. I had, over a dozen other listeners who are GMs comment something like, oh, so I was looking for this character in the adventure and I couldn't find them. Where are they? I'm like, well, no, actually, I made up that NPC. That NPC's mine. Oh, and where's this bit in the adventure that you had a lot of fun running through? Well, no, that was all off script. That was because X player decided to do this weird thing and I just ran with it. Oh, okay, you know what I mean? And the positive feedback there was really great. I know what you mean. Where intellectually you do know, yes, obviously it's my adventure. I paid for it. I can run it however I like. But seeing another person do it on YouTube or a podcast or whatever can somehow just kind of affirm that in your mind, and you just get that extra little bit of permission.
Well, and like you mentioned before, if you watch 2 or 3, steal from all of them.
Exactly. It's like I always say, as a GM, my job is to entertain, not be original. I'm there to entertain my players, or I guess in our case also our listeners. But if I can do that by stealing from other actual plays, or I don't know, from Die Hard or from the movie Tombstone, whatever, who cares? The end result is that if it enriches the experience for everyone, then it's a win.
Yeah, definitely. So we've had 2, 3, 1. That leaves us with 4, unless you Australians count the 4 differently than the rest of us.
Sorry, yes. And we've done them in complete reverse order. That's totally fine. Whatever. The point is that these are all just my opinion anyway. These are, do whatever works for you, basically. But I find, on a really practical level, my fourth and final general bit of advice is to create personalized resources and cheat sheets, because everyone runs things differently. And you, as mentioned, particularly if you're going to be changing things and catering it to your group, one thing that some adventures are really good at doing is creating a nice little summary or a cheat sheet or sort of like an NPC roster, I guess. But oftentimes they don't, and I just find that it's really handy. So I think things like, for example, if you're running either a dungeon or, let's face it, there's all kinds of role-playing games that have got some kind of environment, right? Like a dungeon, or a spaceship that you're going through, or a haunted house that your investigators are, slowly peering around in. If it comes with a map, print that map and scribble on it and draw your own little map key. Because oftentimes in modules that room A and room B will be nowhere near each other, and so reading it through can be really confusing. And flipping back and forth between a map and a description of a room on that map, whether it's Delta Green, whether it's D&D, Star Trek, whatever, I think it's really handy to have a printed map. Do whatever works for you. You can color code, you can mark on things, little notes, little post-its, if you just have it in physical book form. And I think just doing a roster of people of proper names, just make a little list of NPCs, all the important ones anyway, with just a little sentence that will help you as the GM and tell you everything that you need to know about that NPC. Because let's face it, a lot of the time with published adventures, they need to fill a certain word count. And so there can be lots of superfluous information about either a room or an object or a person. So what you can do is you can just, read it through, become familiar, and then you can just streamline that. I think that the Savage Worlds one-sheet adventures are really, really wonderful for this, because they'll just have entire adventures that are like 1 or 2 pages, and it's everything you need. So I guess, you could read a Call of Cthulhu adventure and just kind of like strip it down for yourself, to just what you will find relevant. So I might read through and put, okay, this NPC, a little description, for me as a performative GM, I'll be, I want to do this funny voice for them. And this is a couple of keywords to describe what they look like or whatever. And the same thing can apply to locations, objects, whatever you would find useful. And if what you would find useful is none of this, then great. But, I think creating a little personalized checklist or summary sheet can be really, really good. And it's something you can do while you're reading it through, just read it through, make little notes, anything that might save you time later by not having to look it up in detail,
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and that map thing, Wizards, we need to have a talk.
Oh,
You got to hire somebody. Like, you got to bring on a cartographer, but not a cartographer, just somebody who can make sure that the text matches what the map shows.
Yes, this is very true. Look, they're getting better. I think some are better than others, but I mean, the amount of times that I've been, even what I'm running right now in Descent into Avernus, there's a dungeon early on, and room, I can't remember, room 18 and 19, say, are literally on opposite ends of the map, like just opposite ends. And so, let's say hypothetically Tom was a bit lazy and didn't do this tip that he just went on about for 10 minutes, and I was kind of reading only a little bit ahead and just kind of reading the map key as I was running it. And then, okay, great, they're in 18. We go through that door. Well, probably that leads to 19, right? Nope, it does not. It leads to, I don't know, 3. And so, yeah, just making your own map key is a good idea.
Well, let me tell you a little story of me and Steve's adventures in pre-written modules. We
Ooh.
played Princes of the Apocalypse together.
Oh my.
And
that's difficult.
Well, it ended prematurely, but that was fine.
Also largely what started this podcast.
Yeah. But anyways, we played Princes together, and that is what absolutely ruined me on Wizards map making, because they have no sense of scale.
Scale can be an issue. Yeah, listen, I mean, it is hit and miss, but I think that they have improved, particularly recently. And it depends on the adventure too. Like I think Curse of Strahd has got some really great maps that are really well done. And particularly for how complex Castle Ravenloft is, I think they do a pretty darn good job with that one. But when you consider how many rooms and what strange geography Ravenloft, the castle, has, I think they do about as good a job as you can. But having said that, though, I would not run that without jumping on the DM's Guild or other free blogs and such, and getting I guess, more detailed versions of the maps and perhaps even a resource or a handy supplement to help you run through those more complex things.
Well, that's also what the 4th edition that they've released that in. 5th edition, because I know it originally came out in 2nd edition, so I'm assuming they did it in 3/35 and 4th.
They did.
So they've written it 4 times. They should have it right by now.
It's a popular one.
Yeah.
But no, Princes of the Apocalypse. Princes of the Apocalypse is, I mean, and that's a good example of how some published modules, you want to see if it's something that you're willing to dedicate the effort to. Because I'll be honest, even a more recent one, even the one I'm running right now, Descent into Avernus, it has a very messy, very, very problematic first chapter. I mean, famously so. It requires a lot of fixing, basically. But I thought that the overall story and just the cool setting of going to hell and doing Mad Max stuff on hell vehicles and, tapping into that Dante's Inferno and Diablo idea of doing a fantasy adventure in hell was cool enough that I was willing to put the work in for that first chapter. But it was something I had to be aware of going in, and if I had tried to run it without prepping and without looking, I might have been severely disappointed. I think I have not run Princes of the Apocalypse, but I hear it can get a bit messy, particularly with the isn't there like an enormous number of NPCs, like just a circus of NPCs that follow you around?
I wouldn't know.
Not in our experience. But
Well, we wouldn't know because we got Wind Vane and then went through the portal to the Wind Prince's castle. And that was the end of the campaign because as soon as we crossed through the portal, because we took Wind Vane through it, it destroyed the portal and we could not escape.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, there you are,
We it was very instructions unclear.
Yeah, and isn't it funny, like, because, as much as I've been extolling the virtues of published modules, it really is surprising to me how many, like, really big budget things, like, I mean, D&D is the obvious example. It's like the biggest, most wealthy game, role-playing game company in the world that produce the most expensive and, I guess, highest paid talent writers to create these beautiful mega books of adventure. And you'd think that, they wouldn't come with these really quite problematic issues that can pop up. But, I guess everyone's human. Even the biggest RPG publishers can create modules that are really great, but they might have these points in them that you really need to be aware of and can just, stop the adventure. Like I know there are certain Call of Cthulhu scenarios where if the players don't discover this clue, that's it. or if the players don't take this one particular tactic, it's very likely that they're all dead, which is fine in Cthulhu. I guess that's par for the course, isn't it, really?
Well, I think that brings up, and I mean, we could go on for hours about this, but I just, think it's worth mentioning that specifically with D&D, because they are owned by Hasbro, they are at this point a corporate entity. I think there is some amount of a disconnect in trying to make what is very much an artistic, creative endeavor function in a corporate structure. And that's,
Yeah.
6 levels of discussion beyond where we're at. But, keep in mind, like I said, they're making a product to sell. They're, let's be honest, at the end of the day, there's someone at Wizards of the Coast going, nope, too many pages, get 5 more pages out of that because that's where our profit margin is. And somebody that's, 2 or 3 levels above them is going, our profit margin has to be X or we can't make this book.
Right. Yeah. And I think from what I hear anyway, or from what I imagine, I guess this is just my take. I know for a fact, particularly once again, just speaking about a lot of the bigger adventures, whether it's from Wizards or whoever else, a lot of the time they have multiple writers on them. And so a lot of the issues that pop up can be basically just from a lack of, I guess, consistency or maybe even communication between what one writer's doing in their section and what somebody else is writing in their section. Like, I feel like a lot of the major issues that come with, at least with the D&D, the big D&D modules, is just a lack of final oversight, I suppose, like final editing, final, the old final once over to give it the all clear, because you've got multiple writers doing different parts, seemingly in a vacuum, maybe, but or not. But I just feel like tying things together works really well, and I feel like even some of the bigger companies, maybe because they can afford to hire so many different writers to write the same adventure, might not do that as well, right?
Possibility. So, that being said, let me ask you this is just an off the wall question, but it's been rolling around my head for a while.
Great.
Have you ever taken an adventure written for one system and run it in a completely different system and or setting?
Oh yes, most definitely. I've literally run Ravenloft in modern day New York using World of Darkness, just as an example of something we were talking about,
Let me get. Hold
and
on.
many other
Wait.
things
Slow
like
down.
that.
I gotta write that down.
Yeah. So it's and that was great. Spoiler alert, that worked just fine. That was really great.
You said it. My brain was just like, what? Stop! Everybody, hit the brakes.
Yep. Yeah, because the thing is, and this is the other thing. I do run modules obviously as well, but man, I buy so many modules and published adventures to mostly steal from, to change, reskin. So I might take 3 adventure paths from Paizo and be like, well, I kind of like this particular location from this one, and the villain from this one, and you know what? There's a vampire from a World of Darkness or a Vampire the Masquerade adventure that I'm actually going to use instead of the lich that's in this part of the adventure. You mix and match. Just think of it like you're a chef and you're taking the various ingredients from the modules and putting them all together to make something that you like. But yeah, translating between systems, definitely. I've done that countless times.
Cool. I just thought that was, I don't know, a question worth asking.
It's surprisingly easy to do if you think about it. A lot of adventures can be stripped down to pretty bare bullet points, and so many things can be, as I say, reskinned. You can keep a monster's, you can even keep a monster's stats intact and just completely make them a different thing visually, or you can just sort of take the spine, the story from one investigative scenario and put it in something else. Take something from Gumshoe and run it in World of Darkness, or vice versa. Take a D&D adventure and run it in the Dresden Files role-playing game using Fate.
Well, I think I mentioned this to you in our conversations, and I don't know if I've ever said anything to Steve because he's likely to be one of the victims of it, but I had the insane idea of taking, and you've mentioned it a few times during our conversation tonight, taking Massive Nyarlathotep, which, for those who don't know, is what, an 800-page campaign book,
Oh, it's a big boy. Yeah.
and transferring it to, say, the 1960s and running it with either Fall of Delta Green or to just regular Delta Green.
Yes, that sounds great, by the way. And that's a classic example of how you can do that. That's amazing.
And in there you're dealing with fundamentally similar systems in some ways, especially between Call of Cthulhu and Delta Green, because they're very, very close systems mechanically. And given that, Trail of Cthulhu and Fall of Delta Green exist, working out the conversions as far as statistics between them shouldn't be that difficult. It's more figuring out how to adapt the timeline, and do you maybe need to change some locations because of, real world events that are happening and so on and so forth.
All right. I mean, listen, it's going to be some work, just the way that, oftentimes running a module can be work anyway, particularly if you're converting it. And as you say, there's similar systems, but there'd be nothing stopping you from taking Masks of Nyarlathotep and running that in, I don't know, a Hunter the Vigil campaign, right? I mean, you can rename Nyarlathotep, obviously, if you don't want to use a Cthulhu god in your World of Darkness game, but, there's plenty of dark elder powers in World of Darkness. You can just do a name change and keep it a chaotic, godlike, evil entity, and, you're all set.
Well, yeah. And I think that's the thing that I think sometimes people get hung up with pre-written stuff, is that just change the paint, change the names. Half the time people won't know.
Yeah.
Because this is one thing that I've noticed especially I've become more aware of over the last, say, year and a half that we've been doing the podcast and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, you two can feel free to chime in on this whenever, but I've discovered that for the most part, a lot of times your GMs of whatever your respective gaming group are much more into gaming in general than a lot of the players. Not all players, because there's a lot of players out there that are very into gaming, but your GMs are usually the ones who, oh wait, this system and this system and that system, and we've got a stack of books 3 feet high on both sides of the monitor at the computer
Yeah.
station. And so, where as GMs, we sit there and go, well, but what if someone knows that I stole that from this other thing? And meanwhile, this other thing, you're one of like 6 people in your state that has a physical copy of it. You know what I mean? Like,
That's so true. That's so true. And that's why a lot of the time, and listen, most of the time they're not going to know that you stole it from this adventure. And if they do, it's because they went and read ahead on the adventure, even though you told them not to, Jeremy. And so so you're all good. Like, and listen, I mean, as a GM, as we all know, for those of us that have done GMing and playing, when we are playing, particularly if we're normally the GM, particularly if we're sort of the group's perma GM who has the great pleasure of being run through as a player in a game, if you think that the GM is running an adventure that you've read, you will absolutely, in most cases, just shut up and go along with it. You're there to support them. You know what it's like. You've been on the other side of the screen if you use a screen. So I just feel like GMs are going to. You're right. I think GMs 100% are way more likely to be those that are interested in, collecting and reading a whole bunch of different role-playing game books, including adventures. And they are, for the most part, just going to be so accommodating and understanding if they happen to find themselves in an adventure that maybe they even ran for their group a year or two ago. Who cares?
Well, and yeah, that's sort of my mentality is who cares? I'll play, I've run games and then been like, oh, well, somebody wants to run this. All right, fine, let's play it. I want to see what your take on it is. And
Well,
at the same time, I want to be on the other side of this. I want to know what it's like to be in this adventure, just hear this story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right? I mean, that's the best learning tool. For me personally, if I want to learn a new role-playing game system, if I have any chance at all to play it, to have someone run it for me first, I mean, just for me in my brain, that is just the best way I can learn anything, any new system, is to have it run for me.
Oh, absolutely. I'm the same way. Like, and if I can't get somebody to run it for me, I have to at least have a very solid understanding of the core resolution mechanic.
Yes. You're right. That's exactly correct. Everything else falls out from there, right? Once you know how the core mechanic works or whatever that particular system's unique and weird mechanic is, if it has one, that's important to note. And that's why actual plays can be good, because if you can't have it run for you, you can just watch I don't know, Matt Mercer run it for someone and be like, oh, it's like I'm involved. You can just pretend and just kind of imagine running it yourself.
I usually just grab one of my players and go, here, I want you to sit down and roll dice with me so I can understand this.
Oh, white room testing. You do that too, where you
Yeah.
just grab a. That is so fun to do. That's weird. I was not sure how many people did that, but I will often just grab a random player. Particularly, the best thing is if they show up like half an hour early for a game, and then you just go, we're playing Exalted Essence fight scene. You are this bandit. I am this Exalt. Let's go. And you just,
See, I do it because I have a buddy that lives quite a ways away from me, and so he doesn't get to play in a lot of my games. So it's usually like, hey, what are you doing? Not much. Well, mind if I come over and hang out? No, let's hang out. So and then I'll show up with a game and be like, let's try this. And he'll be like, oh, you working on a new campaign? Yeah.
All right, I'll get my dice. Just a minute.
Twist my arm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love white room testing.
It's great. It's just, I don't know. Because, I mean, honestly, for me personally, the way my brain works, I find it really difficult to learn a new role-playing game system just from reading it. Like that's just bare minimum. I mean, I can do it. It's just a lot of extra effort. Like if I can see it being done, if I can listen to a podcast of it, if I can watch an actual play of it, if I can even better have someone do some testing with me, or best case scenario ever, have it run for me and have it explained by somebody who knows it very well. That's just the best case scenario.
Yeah, I'm very much a hands-on learner and have to have that. Like, I can read a book and sort of understand what's going on, but yeah, I'm with you there where it's like, to best understand it, I need it run in some way around me.
Yeah, I think that depends a little bit. For me, anyway, it depends on the system. Like, one of the first games I ever played a lot of was Call of Cthulhu. So that, BRP basic D100 mechanic is pretty well ensconced in my brain. So going from that to, say, Delta Green, which is not BRP, not technically.
No.
But to me, it's BRP refined and somewhat more elegant, just a little bit. Not like they didn't try to really change it. They just went, well, if we tweak this just this way and that just that way, it's just a little bit smoother.
Yeah, I agree. Delta Green's really, I think it's a good improvement. I'm going to get angry letters about that, I'm sure. But, I think that Call of Cthulhu, having the legacy that it does, is similar to D&D, is somewhat stymied in how much they really can afford to change, even if those changes would be objective improvements because of, their enormous fan base that have been playing it mostly this way for so long. I think that a lot of the big and more venerable systems like Call of Cthulhu and D&D, they can make improvements with each edition and such, but I think there's definitely, they always hit a limit of how much they're kind of quote unquote allowed to change, even if that change would be objectively better.
Oh, no, I agree with you completely. I've said it before that I think D&D's biggest weakness and its strongest selling point is that it's D&D.
Yeah.
And they're both, they're getting sales because it's D&D, but they're also hamstrung as to what they can do to, what do you want to say, improve the system, because they have to live up to the legacy of what is D&D. And that happens with all games. I mean, we had that, last week in the episode, you said you listened to it this morning, Tom, of Battle Lords of the 23rd Century, where they said they had a
Yes.
playtester for their new edition, which was them taking the existing system and just cleaning it up and refining it and going, they had a playtester that said, no, 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 we don't want to change anything. We don't want to change anything.
Nothing. Yeah, that's right. And you're always going to have those folks. I guess my thought was just that Delta Green, it's still a very popular and a very, it's kind of an older system as well. I believe it came about in the 90s, right? But I just feel they have more wiggle room to make changes without too much fan backlash than something more venerable like Call of Cthulhu, right? I just feel like they have more license to change. And so I think objectively, there's quite a few rules things that they did in the latest edition of Delta Green that 7th edition Call of Cthulhu didn't, that are just a bit cleaner, just a bit better.
Yeah. And your mileage will vary depending on who you are.
Yeah.
But,
look, yeah.
You take a game like Star Wars or Genesis with the narrative dice, that's an entirely different kettle of fish.
Yeah. No, exactly right. Exactly right. 100% agree.
All right.
I think it's time we move into the next segment of the podcast.
Yeah, because I think we could have this debate and go round and round for a couple more hours. And, well, I know because Tom lives in the future, it's not getting to nighttime where he lives, but it might if we kept going.
Yeah, that's very true. No, let's do it.
All right.
Okay, well,
Game of the week.
game
I'll
of
get
the
a
week.
coffee. Game of the week.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
All right. So, Tom, you said you listened to the show and you know how to play Game of the Week. So, we're going to let you go first.
Oh, wow. See, here I was hoping for a Steve sandwich.
Oh,
just
well,
have
if
like,
you would like a
I can
Steve
go
sandwich.
first. I can go
Okay.
first.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I can definitely go first. It's that's pretty easy. So, my game of the week is by a game designer named Steve D, or Steve Darlington, who is a friend of mine. He's an Australian game designer, a prolific one, who has worked on. Oh, he's been in the industry for ages. He has done work for World of Darkness, for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. He's also done work for the Buffy role-playing game and Eden Studios. So he has quite the credentials, and he has his own game company called Tin Star Games that produce a whole bunch of great games, both card games and role-playing games. But I want to call it the flagship, but definitely the biggest game that they have, their sort of mainstay, is called Relics, a Game of Angels. So it's kind of like your urban fantasy game where you play angels, effectively. You're trapped on Earth, you're surrounded by enemies, you're desperate for answers. It uses the Fugue system, which is the same system that uses a tarot deck for resolution. So that's an interesting little change, and that's the same system that was used for a game called Alas Vegas by James Wallace.
I've heard of Las Vegas.
Alas Vegas, yeah, it's interesting. Alas Vegas is kind of simultaneously a role-playing game and a published module. So actually it kind of fits in quite well with what we've been talking about today. But, it's very much sort of a single scenario role-playing game, if that makes sense. But it uses a tarot deck, and it's basically a game of emergent narrative that comes from, drawing cards and tarot deck, where you essentially regain memory. So with Relics, your angels who, I guess in falling to Earth have sort of lost a lot of your memories of your millennia of existence. And so as you play, you kind of learn more about yourself, but more importantly, the other players get to sort of narrate and dictate things about your past to you. So it's very collaborative narrative, and that's fits in well with the Fugue system, because originally in Las Vegas, it's all about this strange urban fantasy scenario of the classic hangover, waking up in Las Vegas with no memory of what happened for the last X number of days. But so it's a really fun game. I have not had a chance to play it yet, but obviously a lot of my friends who are also friends with Steve D have played it, and just the feedback from it is unanimously positive. It's been really successful. They had a really successful Kickstarter, and if you like your urban fantasy narrative and collaborative and want to have a cool, nifty resolution mechanic you don't see every day, namely a tarot deck, then give it a go.
Cool.
Neat. That's very cool. That's going on the list of games to pick up.
My list is too long.
Well, my list gets longer every week. Sometimes I just straight up buy things, and sometimes I go, I have bills this week.
All right, Steve, you or me?
I can go. Mine's silly. I don't know. Is yours serious? So if yours is serious, maybe you should go.
No, mine's not terribly serious.
All right. Do you like Baywatch?
I've seen an episode or two.
I liked it when I was a teenager in the 90s.
Right. Okay. I have a game called Beach Patrol from Gallant Knight Games. It's a tiny D6 game, and this book features rules such as slow-mo mode, vehicle training, and lifeguard traits.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay, so my first question then is, can I play David Hasselhoff and or Erika Eleniak, and how OP are they?
They are not OP because they were never OP in the show. And yes, you can, absolutely.
Good.
They also have another edition that is called Beach Patrol Nights, which is a crazy paranormal edition of this.
Oh, wow. So just like Baywatch Nights?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so guilty pleasure. I loved Baywatch Nights. That was so... If you're looking for the absolute epitome of 90s cheese TV show, I think it's pretty hard to top Baywatch Nights.
I usually just go to Xena, but that's just me.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good answer, isn't it?
Yeah,
Um,
Herc and oh yeah, you're right. Herc and
See,
Xena,
I
Herc and
knew I
Xena
should have
probably
introduced
all
the
right.
two of you.
I I don't go to Hercules. I'll say I don't because I always sort of knew he wasn't a great person. But
Oh, there you are.
yeah,
Spill. But no, you're right. I mean, listen, Xena was just objectively a better show. Let's be real. It was the improvement and evolution of Hercules. I think that style of TV show pretty much peaked and was with Xena. It was amazing.
yeah, I am this game. I was scrolling through drive-through and I was like, Beach Patrol. Clicked. I'm like, this is a Baywatch RPG. I'm down for this. Like, I could play a Baywatch RPG. That sounds silly and fun as something I could throw on a table for like an evening.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
I'm just going to point out that if you only want the PDF, it's going to set you back $6.
Oh yeah, it's all of $6.
If you want to go full in hardcore and get the print on demand hardcover and the PDF, it will set you back all of a whopping $18 currently.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
really good value.
Well, in your case, you might have additional shipping because
Oh,
but
yeah, that's true.
Soft cover books only $12. Like,
well, just the soft cover. If you don't want the PDF, is only $9.
yeah, but PDF and soft cover $12. Like, come on, that's a value. And so I will say this: I did shout out Beach Patrol Nights. It does not appear that is a product that is ready to buy yet, but
Oh, okay.
but
But still, nice to have that to look forward to.
right. Beach Patrol is out there, and it does exist. So,
Do you know what is the? I mean, what's the system? What's the mechanics like?
it says it's tiny D6, so I imagine it's probably
Oh,
1d6 style.
I
Yeah.
think that's an offshoot of the old West End D6.
I am vaguely familiar with that because there is I believe, sorry, that there's a whole line of games that use that are predominantly aimed at kids, actually, that use tiny D6, unless I'm mistaken, and confusing that with something else.
No, I'm pretty certain you're correct because there's a ton of these like tiny games that are aimed
Tiny
towards
Dungeon,
yeah.
Tiny Supers, Tiny Hero. Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. So
Cool.
that's fun.
Yeah, that does look massively amusing.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm disappointed because there was going now I'm just thinking back to there was a lot of buzz in the 90s because one of the many Baywatch spin-offs that they had was going to be a Baywatch Australia. There was going to be an Australian Baywatch, basically. But yeah, never happened. So
What's that look like? David Hasselhoff fights a kangaroo at some point, or
I mean, yeah, possibly, maybe, or fights a blue ring octopus and dies immediately.
dies.
Yes.
Puts a video up
I
on
mean,
social media of handling a blue ring octopus. You know.
yeah, it's
Mhm.
oh boy, it's but no, that was a shame. That was a shame. That would have been something hilarious to look back on, I think, these days.
Oh yeah. Plus they either play it super straight or they go for they ham it up. So
Yeah, exactly.
all right,
And
what do you
knowing
got,
Australian
Steve?
television, it'd be all over the top.
Oh yeah.
All right, so I have I'm going to start with a game, but it's actually a sequel game, but you don't need to have the prequel to have the sequel. And in keeping with our, 90s TV, whatever, my game of the week this week, and because, well, for us here in the US, it's coming up on Thanksgiving. Actually, by the time anyone hears this, we'll be past it, but whatever. I've been sitting on this one for a while. My game of the week this week is called Turkey Terror VHS 2.
Wow. Can you say the name again? Sorry.
Turkey Terror VHS 2.
Okay.
And so if you want, I could link you guys the link in the chat.
Oh, I'm looking it up now. Continue.
So Turkey Terror is a role-play game of holiday horror survival. In the game, the player takes on the role of normal everyday teenager or college student who is just trying to have Thanksgiving with their family when the quote turkey invasion begins. Quickly, these characters will become entwined in a plot by the turkeys to end the American Thanksgiving holiday once and for all. Can you survive the invasion into the town of killer turkeys? And this uses a system called the Micro Chapbook RPG system, which says it's an ultra simple role playing game. It's designed to be played solo or with a GM. And this is very much themed as a like VHS B horror movie from like, 70s, 80s, 90s. It's like I said, it's very thematic. It is kind of dark, but here's the cool part of this. It's only $2.99 for the PDF. And the prequel to it, just because this is called VHS 2, the prequel is called Into Terror: VHS 1. It's also $2.99, which is just a kind of less holiday themed survival horror, but with the same thing.
I would like to point out I found a better prequel to that.
Well, this is the legit prequel. I don't know
Right.
what you found.
I found a non-legit prequel
Okay.
that is called Gobble Gobble Gobble, The Uplifted Turkey Rebellion Madness. It's a solo RPG that runs off the
amazing.
Motive story engine, and it's also $3.
Wow. That sounds amazing, though. I mean, obviously we don't celebrate Thanksgiving here in Australia, and so I can't imagine that my group would get very invested in this, but I wonder how easy it would be to, effectively reskin this as some other holiday themed game. It sounds interesting. They get full points for creativity and style for this one.
I just think that the cover graphics look great because it looks exactly like the cover of the image they have of the game cover looks like exactly what you can imagine digging out of the like $2.99 VHS bin at Walmart.
Yes. I don't know what a Walmart is, but yes, correct.
Yep. Well, insert large big box department store. I don't know what you guys have down there, but
Got you. No, I get the idea. You're completely right. This is one of those ones that was on in the back corner of the horror section of my video store in the late 80s, early 90s.
You might find it dusty out of cashies at this point.
Yeah. It looks great.
But yeah, that's my game of the week. Turkey Terror. I've been sitting on that one for a while because I had to wait for Thanksgiving to be rolling around.
Waiting for the turkey to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man,
It's great.
Well, I think normally with guests we ask where they can be found, but we did that sort of at the top of the show.
Sure.
Are there any parting words you'd like to give our audience before we wrap up here?
Just that for those that may be intimidated by running a module, it's all very easy to say don't be, but just understand that, it's yours. You can be just as creative. You can change what you like. There's so many resources online to help you with most published adventures. And yeah, if you were on the fence and hadn't thought of running a published module before, then yeah, give it a go.
Sounds good to me.
I also want to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a real pleasure talking with you folks.
Oh, it's been awesome talking with you finally.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Just to remind people to check Tom's stuff out, sharedsagas.podbean.com. At least I believe I have it called up here somewhere.
No,
Yep.
I
got it right.
That sounds right to me. Yeah, feel free to like us, review us, jump on the Facebook page, and give us a follow. Come on our Discord. Anything else like that? Mostly just hopefully give it a try, listen, and enjoy.
Alrighty then.
Yeah, and with that, we want to remind everyone to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
See you. Bye.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at @andrpgs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.